Hello and welcome to All For Women's Football. So, listen, a couple of days ago it was Scotland, but we've come back home. We've decided to stay right within our wheelhouse to begin with, and this time we're focusing on the lower leagues. I'm calling it lower league lingo. That might be the name when we put it out there. It might be something else. We'll find out. But genuinely, really excited about this, and I found a couple of other guys who I don't really need to look that hard for. They've been in and around the All For brand for quite some time. And we've regionalised ourselves between North, Midlands, and South to do our very best to try and find the best in women's football amongst the lower leagues. That's not just WSL. And we're going to give you a short, bite-sized little introduction and get some of these stories going. So, before we start getting into the football, let's start understanding who our hopefully regular panel members are going to be. So our representative from Oop North, we've got Gareth, who's down south, ironically there. So Gaza, tell everybody who you are.
Hello. So I'm Gareth. Have previously been on the brand over on the All for United channel a while ago. And it was kind of through that channel that I got involved with women's football, with kind of roles with FC United and now with Wythenshawe FC, kind of doing social media and admin secretarial type stuff.
Beautiful. And now he's here, which is excellent stuff. And just over there, we have our Midlands correspondent, as I can call him now, which is John Foster, who has a very similar type of story. John, tell us a tiny little bit about how you got to be in this position.
Much like Gareth, obviously started on All for United, WFC, with both of you on there as well. About 3 years ago, I got hooked on West Midlands football, Stourbridge being my main team. And then recently I have took over head of media for Kidderminster the Harriers, who are in Tier 5. Enjoying local football probably more than WSL at the moment.
Absolutely, there you go. And you know me by now because you've seen me more than enough times. But just in case you've been living underneath the rock, I'll be our southern correspondent due to the fact that I am indeed a southern softie from around near London. So that's me. Media work going on with Stevenage FC, women in Tier 5. So lower league football, especially within the women's brand, is massive on our agenda. So I have been squirreling away. Basically, we're going to pick a couple of fixtures each from, like I say, all of our leagues, whether they be north, middle, or south of the country. And we're just going to have a quick run through, quick look at them. The guys are going to run through why they picked that fixture in particular and why it piques their interest. If there's a little bit of wider debate to be had, we'll have it. We'll show you the league tables for the leagues that they're in. And basically, we're just going to see how it goes. It's the first one. This could turn out to be the best thing we've ever done. It could turn out to be terrible. We'll find out. And then we'll see where we go for next week. So let's see if my technical abilities are going to not let me down. Here we go. So you should be able to see by now. Yeah, beautiful. Northern Premier. So clearly this one's going to be going, you would think, to Gareth. But no, because we only have a Northern Premier and a Southern Premier, which means that John gets his little pick as to which ones he wants to go to. So John Foster, Wolves against Stourbridge. What on earth piqued your interest about this?
I'm from Stourbridge. I'm going to talk from the heart on this one. So 3 years in the making for me here. So I've just started my fourth season following Stourbridge, and it was a game that was practically brand new to every Stourbridge fan. And what I say that is you've got a new manager, new assistant manager, 19 new players, all that on top of a brand new season with brand new teams. So it was an exciting game. We lost 4-0, which was pretty much expected. We lost 8-0 last time we played them, and it could have been a lot worse on this occasion as well. Wolves have very kindly shared some highlights on their social medias where you can see 5 minutes of highlights, and every one of them was a shot from Wolves. We did manage to get a shot away. Leonie Joyce, formerly of Wolves, did manage to get one on one with the keeper, but the goalkeeper saved it. It was just a great occasion, to be honest. Start of the season, we've got a good relationship with Wolves as a fan base. Our fans and their fan base are quite interactive between each other. It was kind of a good way to kind of just shape up. Okay, we've made a lot of changes this summer. Could we still compete at this level, or could we go one step further? And if I'm honest, after that one game, you still can't tell where we are, because I think Wolves probably weren't at the races, but we could only get one shot away. So it was an exciting day. More exciting because of one of the games that Gareth will talk about a little bit later. But for Stourbridge, it's a massive season for them. Will this result define anything? No, I think it'll be about the games between Hull, Halifax, and Sporting Kelsa. But for Wolves, chatting to some of those guys afterwards, after the game, and they think that they're going to compete at the top, but not actually get to the top. So that's pretty much everyone's mindset at the moment. Be interested to see what Gareth thinks about this game, because I know that the game that he watched was about the top and the bottom as well. So yeah, just hand it over to Gareth.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know a huge amount about either Wolves or Stourbridge really. Other than the things that you'd said, I kind of echo really what you say. That they're two teams that have very different aspirations this season. And so, like you say, it's not going to be a game that's going to define Stourbridge over the course of the season. We're going to look at some other games in the sort of coming minutes, but if goal difference does come down to be a factor, then limiting those goals conceded in these kinds of games where you come up against teams that have superior budgets, superior kind of marketing in a sense. It's Wolves, it's a brand that everyone knows, it's a club that everyone knows. If you can limit the goals that you concede in those games, then that can be important kind of come the end of the season. It's like a point in itself if you've got far superior goal difference. So it's tricky, isn't it? Opening game of the season, you can spend ages reading tons and tons into games that actually may not mean anything later on, but it's definitely going to be I think this Northern Premier League, there's going to be almost 2, maybe 3 kind of battles in there. I think it's going to be competitive up and down the table, which is only a good thing, really.
It is interesting, isn't it? The Northern Premier Wolves are quite often up near the top end there, so it's not perhaps the biggest surprise you ever had. But I did want to ask John about, we put the attendances on these for a reason, which I think it'll be interesting to see how they go up and down throughout the season through various different clubs. But 407 for Stourbridge, as you say, you're someone who's been around that club for quite a while. Where does that stand in terms of attendances that you're used to seeing?
For Wolves, that's a good attendance. Considering if another team played Stourbridge, that might be a little bit less. But I think we've got like a friendly rivalry there with Wolves. We've played them for the past 5 years. We've never scored a goal against them. So I think people do come out from Wolves to watch play Stourbridge, whereas maybe some of the other big teams, like maybe a Stoke and Newcastle last season, not many fans would look forward to that game, but Wolves do. And on that, the atmosphere was fantastic. We had a lad called Anthony Wilson, who you might recognise from the Orphan United brand a few years ago. He was cheering his head off as he does, singing songs in every Stourbridge game that he attends. But this time, Wolves also had a few songs under their belt, and it was a great atmosphere and a great occasion as well. Even when Wolves did score, we was in good spirits as well. We kind of went into that game knowing that it was going to be a loss. It was just a case of, okay, could we create anything? Could we keep it down to a reasonable score line in the thing, like Burnley and Halifax and Rugby and Hull? This is fairly respectable for us. So yeah, for the attendance levels, 407, first game of the season, away to Wolves. I think that's a decent score, decent attendance.
Good. But in the, I might be teaching people to suck eggs here, but just in case they're not sure, the Northern Premier, the WNL Northern Premier, is of course tier 3 of the English women's pyramid. So just in case there's people wondering whereabouts we are, we're going to stick with tier 3. We're here for quite a bit because we have the Northern Premier again, as you can see. And here we've got Sporting Kelsa losing to Derby County by 1-4. And so again, we are back over to, I think this was you again, wasn't it, John?
Yeah, just give you a bit of background on this one before actually getting into the game. So Kelsa obviously got deserved to, purely because they're down the road from us. They're based in a small town called Willenhall, which is half an hour down the road from Stourbridge. And as a group
Well, of course, that is always the best thing to happen, is that in the middle of a record, somebody drops out. So whilst we're waiting for John to find his way back in, thankfully, the next game was for Burnley against Hull. Now, obviously, this was one of yours, Gareth. You'll notice there's nothing there, no goal scorers, nothing like that. That's because as of Tuesday at 5:30, when I was mocking all this up together, that only managed to get 2 players and a substitute onto full time. So I wasn't able to find this information as easily as I would have liked to for you. But yeah, Gareth, maybe you can just take us through this one.
Yeah, I think the first thing to kind of echo here, similar to the Wolves and Stourbridge game, is that these are 2 clubs with very different aspirations for the season. Hull coming up from the Division 1 North last year, and Burnley were in a title race with Newcastle pretty much all the way through the season. Burnley is a squad that's stacked with quality. There's former WSL players in that squad. You're looking at a team that is built to win this league. It was a squad that last year I felt was built to win the league. They ran Newcastle close kind of until the last month or so of the season, when Newcastle kind of took advantage of that and ended up going on to win. But in a similar sense to Newcastle last year, that they're not building a squad even that I think is necessarily built to win this league. I think they're building a squad, or in the process of doing that, that is going to be able to compete in the league above. I think what we often see with the National League is the top of each league and the bottom of each league. There's such, not a gulf in quality, but teams that come up often end up finding themselves scrapping around the bottom of that league. We saw that in the Division 1 North last year, where both teams that came up went back down. And I think what we'll see this year with the Northern Premier, I think Hull will be content with staying up. I think that's going to be their goal. Whereas I think anything other than winning the league is going to be falling short for Burnley. They're a great squad, and I think that, like, they are the best squad in definitely in the north. I think there's potentially some Midlands teams that are going to push them close, but yeah, for me, very early on, I would be incredibly surprised if they're not in a title race at the very least.
John, welcome back. Whilst we're still on this fixture, you've just spoken about Wolves, you're talking about Burnley here as well. Who do you think's got the superior squad at the start of the season between Burnley and Wolves?
Between them both, has to be Burnley. I thoroughly agree with Gareth there. They'll be competing. Even Wolves fans aren't expecting them to be competing. You mentioned earlier, Barry, about Wolves being there and thereabouts in the last 3 years. I think what Wolves haven't done is kept on investing, kept on growing. I think they've let other teams catch them up and then go above them now. And I think that's what Wolves fans are suggesting as well. Don't rule out Rugby Borough to finish above Wolves as well. I'm not saying they'll be at the top position, but I could potentially see Rugby going above Wolves as well. And I think it'll be a fight between Stoke and Wolves, who's like 4th and 5th. Stoke invested a hell of a lot last year. You wouldn't know it on the pitch, but I think it was a 2-year plan for Stoke. So I think that they'll probably push on this year because they just have to. They've invested so much. And I think they probably put some foundations in place last year, which kind of distracted maybe some of their on-field performances. So for me, that's your top 5, and I think Wolves will finish below Burnley, absolutely. Whether or not Burnley will finish 1st or 2nd, I think Forest still have a fantastic say in that as well. But it's going to be a great competition this season, absolutely.
Lovely. Well, here we are. We're going to take it back over to here then. So you sort of went in and out a little bit before you disappeared. So again, in Colchester and Northern and Derby County. What was you saying basically? We didn't get too much of it.
Yeah, sorry, I think it's bad internet. So I think basically with Calcer, it's one that we was looking at very closely last year at Stourbridge. It's half an hour down the road. It's not far, and we just didn't want Calcer to get promoted because we was kind of scared of what players they could attract, what players could they take off us. They've got a good relationship with Wolves, so a lot of Wolves players would go on loan there. Wolves have just folded their reserve team, as of we. So, where are those players going to go? Where are those Wolves players going to go if they're going to leave Wolves because they're not going to get game time? Where would they go? Would they go to Calcer? Would they come to Stourbridge? None of them have come to Stourbridge, and in fact, we've lost two of our main strikers to Calcer. Calcer, I believe, have strengthened. Whether or not they've strengthened enough to stay in the league, I guess we'll tell over time. But this game was a good indication because this is the type of game where you're playing at home. You're not against, in my opinion, a top 5 team. Can Calcer get a draw here, which is a first point on the board? And up until half time, it was 1-1, and we're playing well. This game was on Switch Sport Radio, and if you've never heard of Switch Sport Radio, let me just give them a shout out. They cover all national leagues and Tier 5 games. Every Sunday they'll broadcast two games, and he was here. Radio Kev was at this game, broadcasting this game, and he interviewed Andy Mulligan after the game, and it was just you could see the disappointment in the Calcer manager and Andy, because at one point he was kind of going toe to toe with them, and a couple of unfortunate decisions or controversial decisions went to the way of Derby. A penalty that one team shouldn't have had, a free kick that one team shouldn't have had, and they both led to goals, and they ended up losing 4-1 Calcer. But I think Calcer could take confidence from this game, and it's just whether or not now they can bounce back. I believe they got I think it's Stoke or Forest in the next game, so it's going to be another tough game for Calcer, but this was one game where they would have liked to have got something, and in my opinion the scoreline doesn't show it, but they was close to getting it.
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. And to be 1-0, as you can see, Neve DC there scoring for Calcer, but we didn't have a minute on full time, so we guessed it was 1-0 because it said 1-0 at half time, but we didn't know when exactly. But to be in the game for as long as they were until the 72nd minute is quite something. And of course, this is how the league looks. Obviously, Rugby Borough at the top with a goal difference of 10, even though Burnley won 9-0 against Hull. Rugby absolutely smashed Halifax. Poor old Howard would not be too happy with that in the advert, that's for sure. But other than that, it's the first game of the season, so there's not really too much to see there, other than to say, in every single league we've looked at, boys, there's been 5 winners and a draw in every single league, apart from one where there's just 2 teams that haven't played yet. So here we go. This was the next one, and this one, although it says Division 1 North, is indeed a Gareth stop-off. So we've got here York against Chorley. Why did this pique your interest again?
But both of these sides from the bottom half of the table last season, and I think it's always really interesting when two teams that are going to be, or that were relatively close in the table last season, play each other early on. Chorley have recruited heavily over the summer. Ella Ritchie has gone in from FC United. Molly Wood joined from Chester. And it looks as though that recruitment has paid off. I know they brought in defensive players as well. So by not conceding any goals and all 3 goals being scored by new signings shows, at least in these early stages, that that recruitment has paid off. And I think that by getting 3 points on the board early on, and starting as you mean to go on and building that momentum nice and early, is fantastic for them. It's a real indicator of where they're at this year, the improvements they've made this year, and yeah, I just think that it piqued my interest because they weren't like a position or so away from each other, but they were both in the bottom half of the table, and surely were the better side last year. York in the relegation battle, but it's the fact that they recruited so heavily over the summer. Those new recruits got involved on the opening day of the season, and I think that'll be an interesting story to see how far that recruitment can take them this year. But based early on, they look strong, and it'll be interesting to see where they go from there, particularly kind of in the next few weeks, because I think they've got fixtures where you'd back them to pick up points early on.
Absolutely, and of course this was Tier 4, being the WNL Division 1 North, but we are just going to have a quick look at the league table again. It didn't just mean a win for Chorley, it puts them early doors at the top of the league by a new team called Stockport County. So it's always nice when you spot a spelling mistake just as you're looking at it, but there we go. Stockport County, of course.
Just to touch on the league as a whole generally, I think it's really competitive this year. I think that with only one team going up, and that's something that I know that it gets discussed so often. There's definitely a lot there. Huddersfield and Fylde have come down, both of them from the Premier Division North, and I don't know if either of them are going to be the team that goes back up, because Durham are always there or thereabouts. Middlesbrough kind of finished the season relatively strong. Last year were there or thereabouts. Barnsley started really well last year, but tailed off towards the end. So this is a league where I genuinely don't know who is going to win it. I don't know who my early call to win it is going to be. So I think this is going to be a really interesting one to follow over the season.
Absolutely, and we are going to be here for it. So Southern Premier, we finally get down south, and of course this is Tier 3, just as the Northern Premier was played at St James Park, which is of course the home of Exeter City full stop, not just the home of Exeter City men. And you can see they had an absolute bopping of MK Dons, but again it doesn't quite tell the story. 2 goals from Sarah Stacey, a hat-trick from Sophie Gillies, a goal from Emily Toogood, which I think is just an absolutely superb name, and of course Bo Jackson just scoring at the end. But Exeter City had been promoted from the Division 1 Southwest, so this was a new league for them. And MK Dons, a side that finished I think 6th last season in the Southern Division as well. So what's interesting about these two teams is that MK Dons, obviously as they have continued, lost a lot of players this season. So it particularly sort of came to my attention because Stevenage played MK Dons in a pre-season friendly, and I was really intrigued by this because obviously Tier 3 opposition, that's not necessarily something that you get a lot of at Tier 5, even at a friendly level. And they played incredibly well. Stevenage did win 2-1, but it was a tight game. And the thing about MK Dons was that they were young. It's a young team, a very, very young team. They're fast, they're hard working, they try and get in behind as best as they can. But I was really intrigued to see this because they're so young, their captain, Anna Draper, is also the goalkeeper. The poor thing was interviewed immediately after the game, which I just thought was a little bit sad for her, really, because she's got a debut for the club and she's just conceded 7. But fair play to her. They were really, really looking ahead to the future as if, it's just one result, it's fine. And they've got to find their level. And I found it interesting because the Stevenage development side, we had a similar situation when our reserves were relegated, for want of a better term, from the WNL reserve leagues. And they started off in the Eastern Region Division 1, which is the league below where we are. And same thing, really young squad in a league full of women, as an adult women, as opposed to just young women. And they really struggled for the first half of the season. And I'm wondering if this is where MK Dons are going to be. They've got to try and find that level, get themselves used to it. And hopefully it will be a steep learning curve for the girls of MK Dons to see that they can get themselves going. But for your Exeter City, you're absolutely flying high, aren't you? And quite literally, because there you are, top of the table, Billericay Town, another team that were promoted from the South East Division 1 not so long ago. Hashtag United, another one again from South East Division 1. So you're looking at some pretty interesting teams there. Hashtag Wimbledon, particularly, and Billericay, I would be looking out for within the Southern Premier. But there's a few teams there that really look like they're going to go for it. Has anyone got anything they want to add to the Southern Premier, or shall we progress?
I'm just curious about what you think of Ipswich, because I know their recruitment over the summer They've added some experience with the Championship. So I wasn't sure if you kind of had any thoughts on them.
Can't say I've seen a huge amount of Ipswich. Tier 3 isn't always where I go and apply my trade in terms of looking at the knowledge of the football results when they come in. I particularly followed, like I say, Billericay hashtag and AFC Wimbledon because they were in the southeast, which is where Stevenage were before it got relegated in the year after COVID. But certainly Ipswich have got a nice little squad there, and they are one that I think we will have to keep an eye on as we move through the season because, like you can see, already up there with a really good victory. So it'll be very interesting to see how these teams go on. But I'm still backing the likes of hashtag and Wimbledon to come back and do some bits there. And then, of course, we end up in the Division 1 South East, which again is Tier 4. Now, this one in particular, Real Bedford, was, again, quite an interesting one for me because Real Bedford were in our league for Stevenage, and they have got a really interesting story. So I don't know how much you two know about Real Bedford, but they've been taken over by a gentleman who's very much into his Bitcoin and into cryptocurrency, and he has got a fair bit of money. They've had investment from people across the pond. And what I found really interesting about these guys were they were the first game that we played last season. And to be fair, we outplayed them for the early parts of the game, but then we gave away a penalty. Before you know it, Bedford are ahead. We got a red card because one of our players handballed it on the line. They didn't mean to do it, but that's, a red card doesn't matter whether you mean to or not. Can't stop the ball from going in the net. Now, when you went into their ground, it's right next to the Bedford grounds. There's two grounds right next to each other. But what's really cool about this one is when you go into it, I genuinely felt like I was in a Disney theme park because you go into the tunnel, it's completely dark. It's got like this pirate music, effectively really hard rock music going on. And I wasn't quite sure where I was for a minute. And when you go into the changing rooms, it's exactly the same as you'd expect it to be. It's like every other changing rooms that you'll ever get in football. But that moment was quite something. And I don't think you get too much of that atmosphere sometimes at football grounds. But Real Bedford really, really had that. And they've done well, but they've been really, really ruthless in terms of their recruitment as well. Natasha Fenson, probably the best striker I've seen at Tier 5 in terms of her numbers and her stats. She's on something like 160 goals in 140 appearances. This is someone who is really capable of putting the ball in the back of the net. She's not at Real Bedford anymore. She's gone to Luton. So it's really interesting to see how they've decided to pick the players and keep the players that they have. A 3-0 win here. By no stretch of the imagination was this necessarily going to be the toughest match they've ever had to play against Ashford Town, but it's still quite a statement of intent to have just come up from Tier 5 straight into Tier 4, keep a clean sheet, win the game, and, as the league table will show, put them right up there in the mix from the start. So, yeah, again, a very, very, very interesting league. We are back over to Leafield, which is John. So these are our little secondary mentions. So Leafield, you said sort of piqued your interest a little bit. Why did they get an honourable mention from you, John?
They've had a great summer. I'm going to say two words. Tasha Tesgall. She's just joined as the manager there this summer. Absolutely fantastic for the women's game. And I think what Tasha's done there already is change Leafield's culture, change the mentality, change the perception of Leafield. When you can go from a Tier 3 team to a Tier 4 team and take players with you and get the likes of Abby Curry to join you as well. You got something special going on there, and I think it's quietly being done. I think the culture that she brings will automatically make players think, what's going on at Leafield? Oh, I want to be a part of that. So I've said that I was struggling in Tier 4 last season up until the final 2 or 3 weeks, same as the previous year as well. All of a sudden now eyes are on Leafield with their signings, and I don't know how good Tasha's going to be tactically. I know she's got people around her to do that, I don't think that's ever been a forte. It's more about her man management style. But what she's done there is she's attracted loads of big named players to come and join her. A lot happened in a short time, so she's going to have to adapt quickly. But to get a win over Northampton as well, a very steady and able tier 4 team, is a phenomenal result. I just saw the attendance there. That's a massive shame. They've just moved to Castle Vale, so it's a different stadium. But I do think it's the right thing to do. Obviously, when you move stadiums, it is always a risk to build that fan base. But I think Leafield haven't got that badge. Not many people would have heard of Leafield unless if you live in that area. So I think that's probably a part of it. But I'd like to see Leafield not struggle this year, and I don't think they will. I think they'll be looking at top half instead of bottom half. And the players that they've got there, the people that's involved, are just very genuinely nice people who didn't have to go to that club, but they've gone there for the right reasons. And I think it's one to watch out for this year. I think that might cause a couple of upsets as opposed to last year where they were struggling. So, yeah, that result 2-1. Jess Lowe, former Stourbridge player as well. So it's a good start for Leafield, and it's one that they deserve.
Seeing a theme there, John. Definitely seeing a theme. To be fair, this was a game that I was keeping tabs on. One of our players, Hannah Bodley, is a closet Northampton Town fan. It popped up on Twitter whilst I was posting. So at that point, Ray Bella just equalised. But as you can see, 2 minutes before the end, Evangeline Gallup, that's another great name, has took the lead for Leafield there. So very, very good. And of course, that is how the Division 1 Midlands, again, tier 4, looks like with Loughborough Lightning, or we played them before in the FA Cup. Not a bad little team there. Top of the league. So yeah, that's that one. Honourable mention now for young Gareth. He's picked the Northwest Regional Football League. And of course, this is tier 5. Now, as you can see, we don't have the scores for this one either. Again, Darwin FC and Mancunian Unity have not put their information as yet on full time, so I wasn't able to get there with that. That includes the attendance. But again, the result that it was quite interesting for you, Gareth.
Yeah, it was interesting for a couple of reasons. Firstly, Mancunian Unity have just been promoted into the Premier League from the Northwest Women's Division 1 North, which they won last year, having played 22 games and won 22 games. They got promoted into that league last year by winning the Greater Manchester League, where they drew once and won the rest. So the reason this is interesting is their first defeat in the league for over 2 years. So it looks there like Darwin have got a great result. They absolutely have got a great result. Beating anybody 6-1 is fantastic. I think a few people will look at this and feel a bit surprised because Unity they're a newly formed side. They only formed kind of in 2019, so they've really flown through the divisions. And I think there were quite a few people that would expect them to be there or thereabouts this season as well, just because of the quality in the squad that they've got and the way they've moved through the leagues. But yeah, I just thought it was worth kind of pointing out. I don't think it's going to tell the story of Unity's season. I think they'll bounce back. The way the Northwest League is at the moment is we've got 4 games in 2 weeks. So by the time we record the show next week, we'll be 3 games into the season. And we'll have a really kind of good idea about where they've settled. But yeah, I think it's definitely a rough introduction to the Northwest Premier for them. But I don't think this is going to be indicative of where they are. But massive props to Darwin. They've gone. They've won the game at home, and I think for so many teams at this level, if you can pick up points at home and you can win your home games, that gives you such a massive advantage throughout the season. So yeah, just really interesting, mainly because of where Unity have come from in such a short space of time. That I think they'll be a team that's interesting to follow this year.
No, absolutely. And it'll be interesting to see as well how Darwin evolve over the course of the season. And looking at them there, second in the league, just below the mighty Wythenshawe, just there as well. FC United of Manchester also in that league, along with Salford City Lionesses, Crew Alexandra. So some big names, Bury as well, Tranmere, very big names in the terms of football. Just there. The last little one that we've got to look at was my honourable mention, and that was also from Tier 5, the London and South East Regional Women's Football League. And as you can see here, it's Fulham. And there was two things here for me that really sort of stood out. The first one was Barking. Now, Barking used to be in the Eastern region along with Stevenage, so we've had many a tussle with Barking, especially in League Cups and all that sort of thing. And they're not a bad side at all. Usually mid-table, they finished 7th last season. And Fulham are a side that have finished 3rd perennially for the last 3 years in this particular league. So you would expect there to be a slight difference. But Barking, as you can see, the way that regional leagues work, you can get into a league either by promotion or relegation, but you can also have lateral movements because it's the same tier. So in order to keep it as mostly regionalised as you can do, teams will get sidestepped and moved over to ensure that the travelling distances don't get too ridiculous. And that's exactly what happened to Barking, being on the very, very edge of London as they are. We're put into the London and South East Regional. And I mean, they're going to be hurting, I think, after this one, because it's one thing to lose a game, but to lose a game 6-0 is quite something. The thing that got me as well, though, and I mentioned it at the top of the show, is the attendance. Take a look at that. It's at Craven Cottage for a start. 1,579 people in a stadium watching Tier 5 women's football. You guys have been around that. Is that an attendance that you have seen, I wouldn't say regularly, but just an attendance you have seen, really, at sort of Tier 5 level?
I've seen it once at Worcester when I was in Tier 5 last year. It was International Women's Day. So they just had a match on a Friday night at Six Ways Rugby Stadium, and they put on an amazing performance. You mentioned the atmosphere in one of your games earlier, Barry, like going down that tunnel. I think you just got to shout out what Worcester are doing on a very small budget. Obviously, they got promoted from Tier 5 to Tier 4 last season, and I think they can't sustain that. Absolutely, they couldn't sustain it, but as a one-off occasion at Six Ways, I thought that was absolutely amazing, and I think that's the only one that comes anywhere close. Because usually, nowhere near that at all.
Yeah, similar to me. Nothing really like that. I think the big attendances that I've seen have kind of been up around 300. But I think it's good. I think if you kind of put the facilities there, and obviously Fulham have the advantage of having a significant fan base anyway. But yeah, I think if you make things visible, if you make things easy to go to, then people will go to it.
Absolutely that. And it just goes to show why, even at the lower levels, having games at your men's stadium as well can really help both financially and in terms of support. So clearly that was quite a game. And as you can see, you've got Fulham there. Dorking Wanderers, of course, they've got Callum Best investing in them. So they are 3rd in the league there as well. But some very interesting things to look out for. Well, that has concluded all of that. The last thing that we're going to end up doing is just to pick one or two fixtures that we thought would be interesting to look out for. So, John, we'll start in the middle. What was your fixtures that you were thinking could be quite good to look out for this weekend?
Well, purposely I've chosen the two teams that I've just spoken about, so I'm sorry to be a bit boring, but I've done that on purpose. Purely because I can't get over this season. I've done so much content on it already. I can't get over it. So this weekend just gone, how extreme the results have been in Tier 3 North. You got 9, 10-0s, 4-0s. And what I'm trying to fathom is, was it a one-off? Is it a fluke? So I'm kind of hoping, I think that's probably the wrong word. I'm just so intrigued, next week when it's a small team against a big team again, is it going to be that extreme? And if I'm honest with you, I think it will be. But Burnley have got Stourbridge, Calster, I think, are away to Forest. Again, it could happen again. And is this going to be a story of the season where if you're playing one of 8 teams, you're going to be losing something like 5-0 or above. And if it is, then obviously there's a bigger picture there and a bigger discussion as well. For me, I'm just looking at consistency, what teams are going to be consistent or who've kind of fluked it a little bit. Rugby Brother being another one. I'm a big fan of Rugby Brother, and they've gone under the radar a little bit, I believe. So, can they, get another massive result there? So I was looking at sustainability on this week just to see, was last week a bit of a fluke, or is this the way it's going to be for the rest of the season?
Very interesting. Gazza, what about you?
Yeah, so similar. This is Division 1 North for the National League. Huddersfield hosts Stockport. So I think it will give us a really good idea of about where those two teams are at in terms of any potential kind of title challenges and top of the table pushes. The other game is almost a bit of a shameless plug, really, but Wythenshawe travel to Mancunian Unity on Sunday. We had a really kind of good Super Cup type clash at the end of last season that was really close to contested and a great game. So it'll be interesting again just to see kind of where we're at and where Unity are at as well.
Very good, very good. I picked 2. I decided to give the Southwest Division 1 a shout out because obviously it's probably feeling a little bit unloved if you're watching this and you're from the southwest of the country. You're probably thinking this isn't for you, but the next 30 seconds is, because I've picked out Moneyfields against Abingdon. Moneyfields a very, very good tier 4 side, so it'll be very interesting to see how they get on. Both sides won their games at the weekend, so bit like John, be very interesting to see what is going to start happening there as the league takes shape. And you know what, much like Gareth, I deliberately stayed away from my own league, but this game it fascinates me. I think it's going to be absolutely amazing. And that is Luton against Stevenage. Now, just in the men's teams, that would be a match that everybody would want to go and see. But in terms of the women's team as well, the Luton manager used to be the Stevenage manager. So there's a little bit of a sort of clash there in terms of the fact that he's obviously going to want to win because he's no longer with Stevenage, and we're going to want to win because we're Stevenage. It's how it works. But equally as well, Luton look like they are, I can't say the bookie's favourite because I'm not being asked any of them, but they're certainly the favourites for the league this season. But of course, Stevenage, we are working hard to try and get ourselves up there and improve on our 6th place finish from last season. So it's all going to be going off there. Stevenage had a really good win. Luton lost to Royston at the weekend, but we did manage to get across the line. So very, very big match, and one that I am personally really looking forward to. There we go. That's that. It has been slightly longer than I initially thought it was going to be. So we'll go away and have a little think about how we can do that. I've already got a couple of ideas as to how we can trim that down ever so slightly so it's a much more manageable listen for everybody. But big thanks to you all. John, thank you for coming on. Gareth as well, thank you for...
Thank you very much.
It's been an absolute pleasure. It's always good to talk women's football, and we will be looking to do this again next week. So hopefully you'll come and join us. Thank you very much. Goodbye.